Welcome to Future People, conversations with the change makers, impact makers, and the future shapers. Future People is a bold, future-focused podcast hosted by myself, Dan Moussa, founder of Thirdway Advisory. Join me for unfiltered conversations with the leaders who are rethinking value, legacy, and indeed their own leadership in a world that's being rebuilt, from our cities to our climate and our culture. These conversations are not to be missed. Well, today on Future People, I am delighted to welcome Andrew Chapman, Chief Executive Officer of Queensland Major Contractors Association. Andrew is a civil engineer with a depth of experience spanning project delivery, strategy and leadership across a full infrastructure lifestyle. And is CEO of QMCA since August 2000. He leads the peak body representing the major construction engineering companies shaping Queensland's built future, and an avid Wallabies and just established Jeeps fan as well. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for coming in. I promised we'd give the Wallabies a bit of airtime at the start of this podcast. So what a great couple of weeks being an Australian rugby fan.
We're back. But I'm a rugby nufty, have been for
me too.
Too many years, and it's good to see the way that the style of rugby we're playing at the moment. I can't wait to see how we go against Argentina, and then hopefully smash the All Blacks, and we can get the Bledisloe back where it should be in Australia.
If you can get the Bledisloe back, that would be
and my
really
Kiwi
bad.
Mates will now be sitting there going, bloody idiot, chappie.
Mate, that'll be the Trans-Tasman bragging rights would be incredible. It's probably quite a good little introduction, because we want to talk today about like the future of construction and infrastructure in Queensland, right? And we're probably at a real pivotal point in going to the next decade in the Olympics. But just thinking back a few weeks ago to the Lions fans and the sea of red and the buzz around that first test. I actually think, a lot of people, and I speak to a lot of Brits who came over, like, have probably gone home with a real great sense of Brisbane and what a great city it is. And like that in itself just makes you think ahead to the Olympics and the opportunity. Like, Brisbane's a great city and it's so good to see it full, and like what an opportunity that awaits us. Oh,
it's an amazing opportunity. When it was first mooted about going for the Olympics, I was like, oh yes, brilliant, because I saw the opportunity to be able to get legacy infrastructure across the Southeast region and particularly throughout the state as well. And the Southeast Queensland Council of Mayors were the ones that really drove that. And their whole premise was, if we went for the Olympics, we can get some real legacy transport outcomes, faster rail or high-speed rail connections, the 30-minute city and all this kind of stuff. And really, really well reasoned. The state then took that campaign on with councils, and obviously we got the games. I was very excited about it. What we've seen in that, between winning the games in 21 and through to finally getting a delivery plan that's practical and achievable, there was a lot of toing and froing, and there was too much of people standing on red carpet and worrying about how they look rather than focused on how we're going to get things done. We were given a really good runway, and we kind of stuffed around a little bit. Yeah, and time slips away quickly. Around. We had a lot of false starts. We're going to look at this. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to look at that. No, we're not. And everyone keeps going, oh, we've lost time. Yes, I think we have, but we've also learned a lot of lessons along the way too. Yeah. And I think now that we're where we are, we can get going and hopefully get underway with the right planning and delivery. Yeah, mega. And I think we'll definitely dive into that piece around legacy infrastructure, because actually it's really interesting, and you and I were sort of having a coffee before we came on and talking about that. There's all the talk of the stadiums and the bright shiny assets and the bright shiny projects, but actually some of the skill of the infrastructure and the chance to leave a legacy behind is probably more exciting, higher value, more complex, and leaves that impact, doesn't it? I mean, where we're doing the stadium now, in that inner city area, will leave a legacy. It will be an asset that is used by the city. I mean, the Gabba has been a fantastic asset for so many years, but it's really outgrown its site. It's too small for what we need going forward. And the Gabba, to be able to do the Gabba site, we'd have to knock down 4 city blocks to do it properly. Yeah. So Victoria Park is the right answer. Yeah. And it's close enough to the city. Like the MCG, it's going to be walkable. Yeah. So you can walk up through Spring Hill, you can walk from Bowen Hills, you can walk from Brunswick Street, and it's going to enliven those areas very much as well. But it's not just the stadium here or a swimming facility here or a whitewater facility somewhere else or a multi-purpose centre. It's about what happens around it. And the real legacy is, in my view, some of the transport and other outcomes that we're going to have with it. If you look at the Olympic program, you put the 7.1 for the permanent venues, you put the $3.5 billion or whatever it is for the villages and some of the arenas. It's around that $10 to $12 billion transaction all up. The transport component of it dwarfs it.
Yeah.
And that's the real legacy. Being able to move people, mass movement of people, much cleaner, much more efficiently, will deliver great legacy benefits over the region for a much longer period of time.
And ultimately, that the movement or the movement of the mass movement of people actually lends it into like work. You start talking about like workplaces of the future, lifestyles of the future. So yeah, it's an incredibly important factor in it all.
And I think with some of the Olympic, the way it's being a little bit decentralised, particularly even within Southeast Queensland, like you'll have the multi-purpose centre in at Petrie, you'll have a multi-purpose centre at Logan, and we're going to have some really good transport linkages there. They will grow into their own sort of, not CBDs, but business centres, mixed use, business, retail, commercial, residential, cultural, sporting centres that will attract people to them. So necessarily your job may not have to be in the CBD. It could be in one of these centres.
Well, I guess like Parramatta's become a great example of that, hasn't it?
Parramatta, Chatswood, there's a whole range of them within the Sydney precinct.
Yeah.
Same in Melbourne, Box Hill, places like that. So there's huge opportunities for us to really grow as a city and a region.
So when we talk about that future growth, I mean, like especially, and you can put your QMCA hat on for a second here. What's the state of like Queensland at the minute, and like how is Queensland positioning ourselves to be that leader in construction infrastructure over the next decade and into the Olympics and beyond? Are we in a good place? Is there work to be done? What's your thoughts on it?
I certainly think there's work to be done. I look back on our previous big expansion programs. And look, we do a major projects pipeline report each year, and it looks out 5 years plus. And when I first started looking at it in 2020, the pipeline across engineering and construction in Queensland was $48 billion. Last year it was $104 billion over the same forward 5 year period. We're doing it at the moment, and I won't give it away because it's being launched on the 5th of November, and I'll get in trouble if I give it away too early. Let's just say it's a little bit more than that. But when you look back historically, we had a big boom through the mid-2000s with work, predominantly transport related and a bit of health. Then we had the big energy and resources infrastructure boom through 2010 to 2015. And that was the 3 LNG plants, the coal seam gas extraction projects through that Strat Basin. We had 5 coal mines that were done at the same time, 3 port upgrades, railway lines, etc. And then we didn't do a lot. At the same time, New South Wales and Victoria started going nuts. We're now starting to come out.
Yeah.
And we've got a big programs in front of us. We've got a health investment program. We've got the Olympics. We've got water. And that's probably one that not a lot of people are talking about yet. $25 billion plus of dam safety upgrade program over the next 15, 20 years. We've got the energy transition stuff, and we've got transport, and of course we've got housing. So there's a lot to get done. Are we doing it right as we stand at the moment? No. Can we improve? Yes. Are we moving there? Yes, 100%. So I think there's huge opportunities for us to embrace collaborative procurement and delivery far more. There are some really good pockets where that has been done very, very well. And what that doesn't necessarily mean alliances for everything, not at all. What we're talking about is actually getting the contractors, the contracting delivery partners, to sit with the engineers, sit with the architects, sit with the client, and actually scope the project out properly on how you're going to build it so you can understand all the risks, and you can start to quantify those and get them right up front. It's rather than this client spent 4 years working up the scope of a project, hands the documents over for you to tender in 4 to 8 weeks and says, by the way, you can't rely on any of our information. So what could go wrong? Everything. So rather than starting off a relationship at 20 paces with pistols, let's actually get together and do it properly. And there have been some really good pockets of that. And I can see what I'm seeing of late, particularly over the last couple of years, is that start to embed itself more and more. And I think that's a really good opportunity for us to take forward so that we can give price and time certainty to clients, because the key thing for them is that if they're a private client, they're going out to get money. If they're a government client, they've got to go to Treasury and get the money, but also they report to politicians, report to the public. And when they see cost increases, or as it's called, cost blowouts, it doesn't bode well for them.
Yeah.
So to be able to give that price and time certainty, we need to spend a bit more time up front with not consultants running around. Not that there's anything wrong with consultants, but
good ones.
Yeah, good ones. But what we need to do is make sure that the people who are going to deliver are embedded so that we can nut down those risks and how you're going to build it. I've just finished reading How Big Things Get Done by Matt Flyberg. And look, there's some stuff that resonated with me because I went, yeah, well, that's how I do projects. So that's how I think about projects. He talks about think slow, act fast. And what he's effectively saying is get your planning on how you're going to deliver this thing right. For me, it's proper planning prevents poor performance.
Yep.
So it's embedding your contracting parties, your engineers, your architects, with the client all together so you can nut down those risks and how you're going to build it. The Empire State Building was actually looked at from 10 different angles and they worked out every single nut and how they're going to put the thing together, looking at it in different ways. So when they came on site, they were able to get very quick construction processes. Now, granted, its safety was appalling.
It was a different time.
Different time.
That level of of detail and preparation, right, is maybe gone, hasn't it?
That's right. And what we've got to be looking at now is safe, productive workplaces. Safe workplaces are productive workplaces. Productive workplaces are safe workplaces. And we've got to look at how we bring in innovation, technology, automation, a whole range of things, because we do have finite level of resource to be able to deliver these projects.
Yep.
And when you've got a finite level of resource through your labour force, your subcontractors, your suppliers, you've got to look at how you utilise that better. Like there are robotics now that will place and tie reinforcing steel on bridge decks, on slabs, etc. Why can't we be deploying that? Because that could work 24 hours a day. So we can
safer.
And safer. So we can then come in behind, our cycle times can get better. We're not, one of the big risks is tying steel. It's hot, it's hard work. If we can have robots that are doing that 24 hours a day, then we can come along and do the pouring behind it. We could automate the pouring process. We can use precast solutions a lot better too. In building, we can be looking at, I hate the term MMC because I don't think it's particularly modern, but modern methods of construction, which is prefab, modularisation, automation, all those solutions are part of the mix. Is any one of them going to solve it? No. But when we start looking at them in a holistic sense and where we can apply it, then I think we're going to move the needle. And the critical thing to that is collaborative procurement, where you got the contractors sitting with the client and the engineers going, we'd actually like to look at it this way. Would you be prepared to take a gamble on this kind of technology and us doing it because we think we can get these benefits? And when you see those benefits, you all can share from it. Now, a lot of that investment that, construction has always been come in, you do one project and you move on. It's very hard, unlike, say, mining or something like a repetitive industry like manufacturing, to recoup major investment in technology and in that kind of stuff on one project. You've got to look at it from a program perspective. The first project may not necessarily give you your return, but your second and your third are definitely going to.
Yeah.
So we've got to look at it much more programmatic style as well.
And it's such valid points. It almost feels like, in some ways, as a nation, as a state, it was a bit of catching up to do. I mean, we're talking about precast and prefab and tech. I mean, I remember being at Lang O'Rourke 20 years ago, right? And Ray O'Rourke opened a precast concrete facility in the north of England. At the time, it was 2008, and we were working in a 300,000 square foot hospital in Scotland, but it was at the time the biggest precast concrete structure in Europe. So, is there we've got a bit of catching up to do with the rest of the world in that tech and automation and modern methods?
Great case in point. Everton's Stadium, so Everton's new footy stadium that's just been finished in Liverpool, was done on-site construction, 2 years, 7 months.
Yeah.
Why? Because they modularised and prefabbed basically the entire thing. So in factories, built the corporate suites. In factories, built the entire toilet blocks. In factories, did a whole range of things, brought it to site and basically kit played it together. And they did that because they built that design, that into the design. So rather than working out how you're going to build to a design, the design was how you were going to build. And that is about thinking slow, acting fast. And there are many examples like that around the world. We do need to embrace more modularisation. I mean, why we're not doing a lot of the health stuff, the wards, as modularised. Why we're not doing
even the theatres, right? You can have them like the hygiene units to a degree.
Potentially.
You can, right?
I think certainly the wards would be the first one to start with. You can have two or three designs, a 1 bed, a 2 bed, a 4 bed, and you've got so many actual prefab manufacturers in let alone in Queensland, let alone the country, that you could just go, here's the design, give me 100 of these from you, and 200 of here, and then you bring it to site, principal supplied, and put it together. Housing is another great one.
Modular housing's like, I mean, that's got to be like the answer to the housing crisis, right?
Very much so, but we've got to remove some of the tight technical specifications and regulations we have around it. Like our building codes require every single element to be personally inspected. Well, you can't do that when you're bringing a completed prefabbed module to site. So it's more of you go and inspect it, the first one in the factory, and then it's right, type approved, bang, we're away. So we've got to look at how we look at our regs, our tight technical specifications to enable that. And it's the same in the civil space. We've got to be looking at how we reuse our materials better and how we also design and build our stuff. I mean, why are we designing roads, say, for instance, 40 or 50 or 60-year design life when we rip it up in 20 or 30? So there's
such a simple thing. Like when you say that, like there's such simple things, aren't they? But like, it's amazing how these things get overlooked. And we talk about automation and AI and the future of jobs, but actually there's probably an opportunity for a whole new industry, isn't there, in Australia here in terms of modular construction and prefabrication? There's such opportunities to create new manufacturing industries, like new pockets of business, new markets.
Certainly a bit of that, and I think there's really good opportunities for us to be looking at modular energy solutions. Small scale, mid scale, pumped hydro. You can do modular. I've been working on a concept for a little while on that. There's some other ones that you can do as well. And when you are able to break it down in those components, you start to get your real efficiencies. And I think there's huge opportunities in that space. Health's a great one. Housing's definitely a huge opportunity, but it comes with scale. And when you're doing like a one-off, it's very, very difficult. When you're doing a program of them, then it really starts to work. I worked on a modular prison solution when I was at Serco, and the company that we were doing the modularisation, the prefab with, were in the factory, and under roof there were 2,000 student accommodation modules being built at once. And then in the next building, there are another 1,000 hotel rooms for Hilton in the UK being built all at once.
It's the way forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the Hilton hotels in the UK are modular. You wouldn't know. A lot of the student accommodation in the UK and other places is modular. You wouldn't know. It's actually really good stuff. And then I was shown some of the 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom unit style stuff that they had, and you go, wow. You walk in and you go, this is very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the future. And on the subject of future, you mentioned before future infrastructure and legacy infrastructure. We mentioned time and have we lost a few years? And how do you strike that balance now, right? With a hard deadline to deliver the Olympics, right? And everyone's focused on the stadium and the precincts and getting that right. What steps are in place, or how do we ensure that we're actually thinking beyond the Olympics, right? And there's so many stories, right, of cities that host the Olympics and they build the stadiums and they have all these ghost arenas and ghost precincts, right? Like, is that conversation happening now? Is it front and center thinking about the future? Because, like you say, what an opportunity to create real legacy that could last for decades beyond.
Yeah, look, I think from the start, the whole premise has been about not doing a Sydney Olympic Park, in one location. And look, Sydney Olympic Park worked really, really well.
It was dreadful. I was there for the fair test of the lines.
Yeah.
We talked about Brisbane and Melbourne being able to walk through a stadium and have a precinct coming out of a core stadium is just depressing.
It worked really, really well for the games, but it took it at least 10 years after the games to start to get a bit of momentum about it, like hotels and a bit of commercial and that kind of stuff. Whereas we've been talking about it being the venues being distributed throughout the city. Which is this new norms, which is effectively, making the games suit the city rather than the city suit the games. And I think the distributed nature of, the main stadium in Victoria Park, the swimming in that location close to the city centre, the athletes' village at the R&A, which will then convert to housing after the games, all needed, all within the inner city area. And then you've got multi-purpose centres at, Logan and Petrie, which are going to service those growing outer city regions or council regions really, really well. Then we've got stuff on the Sunshine and Gold Coast. It's a really distributed. So we're not going to find that you've built something and suddenly it becomes a white elephant, because it's actually, there is a need for it from a legacy perspective. Then the key thing it becomes is making sure that our transport connections that we're building or going to do for the games are there for a legacy perspective. I mean, council came out with this going for gold blueprint around the Brisbane Metro expansions. Yes, that's servicing the games, but it's actually servicing what we need for the longer term around that movement within the inner city area or inner area of Brisbane from a public transport perspective, filling the gaps that the rail, between rail, we've got, and or converting various things to really drive further development and densification around our transport corridors. We're talking about getting rail up into the Sunshine Coast. Geez, I worked on a project on that in the 90s.
Yeah.
So
that is mind-blowing,
been
isn't it?
long overdue.
Jesus.
So getting faster, well, they call it faster rail. I've got a great story on that.
Let's hear the great story.
Getting more frequent higher speed connections to the Gold Coast is vitally important.
Yeah.
And the Gold Coast is sitting at, it'll be at 1 million people in time. The Sunny Coast will be at 750,000 in time as well. These are big regional cities that we need to connect throughout southeast Queensland. So that legacy, that transport legacy, is vitally important. And then we've got to be able to fill in that gap in between, and that's where the metro and other things play a role.
But are you confident that those conversations are taking place and that thought process is in place? Like, you're seeing it, you're feeling it?
Yeah. So I'm from the start, that was always the premise. Yeah. Certainly council have pushed, you really got out there on the front foot with their going for gold, and now we've got GECA and state development really and transport for main roads really driving some of those outcomes. And I think we will get it right. What we will see post-games will be real legacy infrastructure, not just from a sporting and a cultural perspective, but from a transport, from a mobility, from a urban development perspective that will transform this city for the next 20 years.
One thing I always think about too, and I often think it's forgotten about, but we're building sports precincts and stadia. I'm like, is anyone talking to like the Lions, the Broncos, the Dolphins at the minute about, again, like future-proofing these stadiums and these grounds to be used by the clubs in the future? Or is that, because often like we build a stadium, you're like, actually, if we built that differently, then we could have had rugby here or AFL or cricket, whatever it is. I mean, do you see that sort of stuff happening? Do you think that becomes an afterthought?
No, it's certainly happening at the moment. That's been the predominant thinking throughout the entire process. Yes, we're building something. Well, actually, what we're doing is the whole plan premise is we're building something because we need it for the Lions, for the cricket, or whatever it is for the future. But we're also going to use it for the games. And if you look at, I remember when Sydney Olympic Stadium was built, whatever it's called now, Accor,
I think.
I remember there was quite a discussion around how it was going to transition after the game. So it had, the big side stands, and then you had these double level ones at the end. At the end, one of the levels came down, and then what they did was they moved in the eastern stadium, or the lower level moved in so that it was closer to the ground, and it transitioned to its sort of legacy piece now, which is rugby league, rugby union, square stadium. I think for the stadium we're talking at in Victoria Park, it will be obviously it's been clearly named, it's going to be for the cricket and the AFL post. But if it can hold 63,000, imagine the next Lions tour there. If you feel close enough to it. I mean, the beauty is with Suncorp Lang Park is that it is the best rugby ground in the world from a visual perspective. There is not a bad seat on that ground.
I'd probably go second best after Millennium Stadium in Wales is something pretty special.
I thought you were about to say Lansdowne. No, not Lansdowne.
Murrayfield.
Murrayfield.
I mean, Murrayfield's a great stadium, but it's old, it's tired. Like, it's an incredible, I mean, like the beauty of Murrayfield is you walk from the centre of Edinburgh and you walk out and the history, but it's definitely... She's old. She's old and rusty. She's old and rusty.
There's the benefit of Suncorp Stadium.
Yeah.
And what we're going to have at Victoria Park.
Yeah.
You can walk rather than driving or whatever.
Yeah.
You can get there by public transport. You can get there by walking from public transport or from the city.
It makes such a difference. And I have to say, we talk about stadium shapes in the future. Actually, having been to that second lines test at the G, and I know the talk about being an oval. It was good. You could see it. The atmosphere was incredible. The walk back to Melbourne to get a beer was 10 minutes, and actually, it wasn't an issue playing a rectangle pitch in oval.
As a Wallaby supporter, it was a fairly depressing walk back to Melbourne.
I had a real spring in my step, to be honest.
And my son was like.
Raging. We'll not go into the legal breakdown, but we'll not. That's probably a whole different podcast on that, and all sort of theories behind it, right?
Yeah. And as a referee, you have your own views, but look, split seconds, you deal with it.
Yeah. Well, and as I say, split second decisions in all walks of life and in business as well. One thing I'm fascinated by, right, is the future of leadership across all industries, and undoubtedly, I think the next decade it's going to be incredibly challenging, right? Leaders have always faced challenges, but I always felt, there might have been a technological challenge at one stage, or it could have been a period of geopolitical unrest and climate's come in. But I personally feel that as a leader now, never ever has been so many challenges at once. Like climate risk is real, right? Like it or not, and it's affecting supply chains, and people are feeling that. The geopolitical unrest across the world is a tipping point.
We saw something yesterday.
Correct, a tipping point in so many regions. Social unrest, without going too deep, arguably sort of society is closer to collapse than it's ever been. Economical challenges, all at once. So, as a leader, and you being there and you deal with leaders and you are leaders every day, like in your own mind, what do you think the most important skills and leadership qualities that are going to be needed for the next generation? And let's talk about construction, right?
Yeah.
And infrastructure. Like, you're someone in Southeast Queensland and Queensland, Australia. You may be stepping up to lead a main contractor or delivery company or an infrastructure company. What's your advice, or what do you think you need to go out and become adept at, or improve, or future-proof yourself?
If I go back to when I went through uni, and like we were taught how to be engineers, how to engineer things, how to interpret plans, and then to actually work out how you're going to build things and get it done.
Probably upset a lot of architects telling them they couldn't. That design is not actually achievable. I'm afraid.
I remember my first ever lecture was structures in first year, and our structural engineer came in and canned architects, and I thought, geez, I like this industry.
Like this guy, yeah.
This engineering's for me. Sorry, architects.
It's true though.
But putting jokes aside, when I came out, like when I went through, as we went through our degree, we were taught more around some of the commercial aspects, and then a little bit how to deal with communities and that kind of stuff. Today, those that are coming out and then have to, the elements you have to deal with in the workplace, you have to be able to manage industrial relations. You have to be able to manage the community and work closely with them. You have to be able to deal with, massive commercial issues. You have to be able to determine the key issues that a client wants and interpret all that, and putting it all together, and your supply chain and working with them. The versatility of our engineers and project managers and people on site today is so much more than the traditional. And it was interesting. I was sitting in a meeting yesterday, and there was a comment from a client that a lot of the industry has lost its way in terms of being able to sequence projects. Yeah, we go off and we do massive, big, Primavera or P7, whatever it is now, schedules, and we've got multiple critical paths, and everything's down to the littlest issue. But we're not then sitting there and going, what's our 2-week look ahead?
Yeah.
And I think we've got to come, like we teach our guys now about how to be commercial. Yeah. Because we've been forced down that route because of bottom line, and issues around, we've got lawyers at 10 paces, so you don't really want to engage them, and so you try to know what you're doing. Today, the project manager or the project engineers, they have to deal with commercial. They've got to deal with public, blah, blah, blah. I think that's probably the biggest change, and people who can be able to nut down to your couple of key things that you need to look at and be focused on those, and be able to have a good team around you and trust them. That's critical for me. So some of the latest stuff we're seeing is a lot more around that social side, social license to operate. How you're working within the local community is a really big one. If I'm going out to do a wind farm, how am I engaging the local community? There's a lot of roads that have to get built. So am I talking to the local, do I go and talk to the local farmers? If I put a road in here, how does it benefit? Where do I put it to benefit you? And I remember back to when we did the coal seam gas work. I was at TEAS at the time, and we did a lot of the upstream work for QGC. And there was QGC, Santos, and Origin up in the Surat Basin. And you also had Arrow coming in as well. And originally it was, well, we can just come on here and do what we want because the law said you could. But it was more around how do you massage it to where the well goes and what roads and access to the wells, how you do it in a way that doesn't, it means it can coexist with farming that's been there. And it's not just providing the water back to them, it's where that road is to benefit them. So you're running, and then when you're running your gas and your water pipelines, run them down a fence rather than through the middle of a paddock. You site the well in the corner of a paddock rather than the middle of a paddock. So it's those kind of different thinking nuances that are certainly coming and will become to the fore a lot more when we come into a local community to build something. How does the local community benefit, not just from the end product, but along the way? And it might be that we're going to go and grab some ridge gravels to go and do a sub base on a sub base, an embankment, things like that you're utilising the local community and the local opportunities better, and you can leave a real legacy in terms of industry outcome at the back end of it. Now, when you come in to do a project in a community, you're not going to have a quarry everywhere. You're not going to have a fabrication facility in every community, but it's building some skills. And I think the coal seam gas in the end developed that particularly well. The coal industry has developed it very, very well for a long period of time, where they have built up local capability to supplement some of the bits coming in from the coast.
It's interesting to talk about the community piece is so important. And at the start of the conversation, we talked about, collaboration is a key to pre-project. When we look at community engagement, because traditionally, like, you've obviously got the public sector and the private sector, right? And there's obviously more collaboration there. We talk about these big infrastructure projects, but I don't want to say like whose responsibility, but do you think we need more collaboration between private and sector when it comes to that community piece? Because traditionally it's been, like the politicians of a local government will go and rally the community or get them behind, and then ultimately as a private contract, you just come in and deliver the work and sort of leave, right? And it's not as simple as that, but on the basis of it, do you think is the private sector doing enough to engage communities, or do you think we need to be doing more, or then potentially collaborating closely with the public sector?
Oh, look, I think there's room for improvement, 100%. Do I think the private sector is doing it all wrong? No. Do I think they do it right?
Yeah.
Do I think the public sector do it right? Yeah, they do. But there are certainly room for improvement. And we've seen governments becoming a lot more attuned to social, community, environmental outcomes, and we need to make sure that we all move along that path together. But sometimes it's going to cost. So we have to find a way of being able to do that. And if you want to achieve a certain social or community outcome, and it's, there has to be a preparedness to be able to put some money on the table to achieve that. I think there's a big argument at the moment about Mount Isa, which is very much a private side of things. Glencore is saying that they're going to pull out of the smelter and the like. Yet there is a massive private sector built-up demand and a community, a very large industrial community that is looking for that to be able to stay, because there's a lot of those smaller mines and resources around that it could still very much use it. So there's got to be some kind of public-private meeting in the mines to come with a solution. Now, I understand that the state government's put forward a certain offer. They're waiting on the feds to be able to come in and do it as well. And we've got to be looking at more of those. We can't just be saying, well, that's a public thing, that's a private thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And health's probably a really great example where you can co-locate private health with public health.
See it all the time, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And it might be able to take the load off some of the public stuff and assist it. In the same with our infrastructure, we've got to be looking at how public and private investment can be co-used to deliver some really good outcomes. And that doesn't mean putting toll roads everywhere, but it's about how you could potentially get some investment into transport that can deliver some really good outcomes to complement public investment so that we can make that public dollar go further. Energy is a really good example for that, where we've, where it's a market that is, very much commercial. There is great opportunity to have more private sector investment along with public sector catalytic investment that's going to deliver some great outcomes as well.
We've touched on so many like really interesting points, right? About like seeing opportunity, leaving future legacy, the need for collaboration, and we talked about future leaders there. We talked about, a lot of it comes down to stakeholder management of people, empowering people, getting the best out of people, and it's as we go into this more automated AI-centric world, there's still obviously, how do we manage that and people. Do you feel, because I sometimes do, we're sort of living in a period where we need really strong leaders and really strong decision makers, but I feel like we're almost losing a generation of decision makers, and there's a lack of I think people out there who are really willing to make sort of decisions, and like not all decisions are great, but a decision's usually a good thing, right? Because it creates a way forward. Or are we living in a time where people are like, they'll sit in a public-private forum, for example, or a discussion with Geeka or about the games, and people have these incredible ideas, but they're almost too scared to voice them or actually put their hand on themselves. You know what, like, we haven't thought about this, we should. Do we need more people to speak up? And almost, I talk about people willing to put their head above the parapet. I feel like we live in a time where people almost don't want to do that at all and sit in things. And we miss opportunity by doing that.
Yeah, look, I think there's a reluctance from a lot of people to do that, simply because if you do stick your head above the parapet, sometimes you get shot down.
Yeah, tall poppy syndrome, right?
Yeah, tall poppy syndrome. But also, there's a lot of people in business and all walks of life who are introverts, who don't like speaking in the public forum. So we've got to find ways of engaging them in forums that they do feel comfortable speaking. And in a lot of those public forums, you'll get the loud person like me stand up and say something, or a minority stand up and say it, and nobody challenges it because, oh, geez, I'm a bit worried about saying something. Look, leadership is important. It's really important in being able to drive the right outcomes, reflect what community or the need is, and drive it forward. But we've got to be able to bring the community, bring business, bring industry, and stakeholders along for the journey as well. I remember when we were at uni, we did a mock. It was back when the Koala Motorway was on. Now, this is back in 1994. So people
don't give your age away.
Yeah, people like me who have turned 50 now will remember this. So 1994, the second M1 was proposed, which is...
Feels like we're still building the first one, to be honest, when you drive up there.
This is the old, through Daisy Hill, there was going to be a motorway to the east of the existing M1. And we did a mock community session where we had client, some people acted as a client, some people acted as the contractor, the engineer, and then dealing with the community. And it was a real eye-opener. So we had a lot of the year was the community, and then you had others up there, and you had to go through it in different senses. It gave a real eye-opener as to how to deal with these kind of things. But we need to find ways that you do engage the relevant population and the relevant industry to be able to get the right views, to be able to deliver stuff. And I think most of the time we do it right.
Yeah.
Can we do it better? Yeah, I think we can.
I just think sometimes I feel like there's so many good ideas, and people I'm like, why didn't you say that? That's a great idea. I remember, and it's tough, isn't it? But we're sitting on so much knowledge and ideas and solution, and I wonder how much of that goes missing.
Well, I remember my old man telling me, Andrew, you're better off being quiet and let everyone think you're an idiot than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
That's a generation thing.
That's a generation thing.
Like that, seen or heard.
Those who know me know that I've completely ignored that and just opened my mouth, and people know I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Well, look, I can attest to that. But you know what? It's funny. And even I think about my world and coming. I've been worked in industry and now obviously as exerted senior recruitment. You used to go in and you sit with clients and you just take a job brief, right? And when you're younger, you're almost too scared to ask a question because you feel like you know it. Whereas now I'm like, what does that mean? How do you build this? And that curiosity and intrigue has improved my knowledge massively 100%. Just by asking.
Yeah, and you've got to be curious. You've got to ask questions if you want to know things. My son went for a job recently, and I said to him, now, have you got your questions? He goes, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I said, you've got to be able to have a question or two that you can ask the interviewer about the role.
Yeah.
Oh, do I? Yeah, mate. So you, like anything in life, you need to query. And if you don't know, the best thing to do is to say, can you actually explain that? Yeah.
But no one does anymore, and it's so important. People are more than happy to explain, and actually people come alight when you ask them to explain things and go into depth about a project or a solution or something they've been involved in.
Yeah, and when we go into planning workshops for projects or businesses or whatever, the facilitator will always say to you 100% at the start, there is no dumb ideas. So please come forward with your ideas. And that's trying to create a safe space for people, particularly the introverts who will sit there and go, I've really got a great idea, but I don't want to share it. Yeah. And I've worked with the Japanese, I've worked with the Koreans, I've worked with the Chinese, I've worked with Indians, I've worked with European companies, I've worked with American companies, and they've all got different approaches to life, and particularly business. Culturally, very much a lot of your Asian culture is very quiet and reserved.
Yeah, you can't lose face.
Yeah, you can't lose face. And only till you have a very strong working relationship with the Japanese, and I've done a lot of work with them, will they come forward with ideas. They'll sit there and quietly come back to you after the meeting and say, I think this.
Yeah.
And the Koreans do the same and others as well. And you've got to find a way of, one, breaking that down, but also enabling them to be able to do that and feel safe that they can do it.
I'm really glad we've had this conversation, because I'm probably guilty as one day I ride this roller coaster of probably emotion and thought. Like one day I'm like super pumped for Brisbane and Southeast Queensland and the opportunity, and when you're out there, it's there and exciting, and other days I'm like, oh, is it there? Is it going to happen? But I have to say, having had this conversation with you, mate, I feel more infused and more excited about the opportunity that awaits Southeast Queensland.
I think we've got a great opportunity here in not just Southeast Queensland, but Queensland all up, because, look, not all the state is going to get direct Olympic benefit in terms of having an event in your city or your regional centre. But what they will have is a huge amount of tourism that comes off the back end of it, or other infrastructure that enables them to be part of it.
Yeah.
And we will need to locate a lot of the stuff in the Southeast corner. Simply, it is the capital. Yeah. It's the region.
But like you say, people are going to come to the games, and then Australia's a long way to come. So you're going to extend your trip and go and explore the rest of the region.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to come here. And what really reinforced it to me is Sydney and Melbourne have been the gateway, particularly Sydney has been the gateway to Brisbane Australia for a long period of time. People fly into Sydney and they've often turned left and gone to Melbourne. What's going to happen now is they're either going to fly into Sydney and turn right, or they're actually going to fly into Brisbane, and they're going to go, you know what, might go down to Sydney, but I actually want to go up the Great Barrier Reef, or I want to go out west and have some real cool experiences, and that's where our opportunity lies. And there's this Queensland tourism strategy at the moment that is hopefully going to really capitalise the benefits that the Olympics and other events will bring. We've got our Rugby World Cup.
Do you know what?
2 years' time.
You forget about that, right? You got bloody Rugby World Cup coming in 2 years' time. How good's that?
And how good was the 2019 World Cup in Japan?
Yeah.
Everyone went over it. This place isn't like, we all knew it hit from here, but a lot of people from the rest of the world went over and went, how good is this place?
Yeah. It's funny, I'm sort of thinking of a wry smile on my face because you're talking about people going to Sydney and turning left. And I always laugh, and I'm obviously Scottish, right? But I'm like, the number of Brits and Europeans who emigrate to Australia and go live in Melbourne, I'm like,
why?
Might as well stay in Europe. What's it? I don't get it. Like,
do you really like that climate?
Yeah, if you want
that's why you left. Come here.
Correct, right? And I'm just like, why would you not come to Brisbane or Queensland? We're actually, because a lot of people move for better quality of life, be more outdoors, the lifestyle, the beaches, or whatever. I'm like, why are you living in Melbourne? It just blows my mind.
Where in the rest of the world, in the middle of winter, can you walk around in a shirt and pair of shorts?
Correct, mate, correct. I literally, most winter mornings in Brisbane, I chuckle to myself thinking about my mates at home who are outside defrosting their cars and scraping ice off of windscreens. Yeah. Days I don't miss. Mate, this has been such a good question. Such a good conversation. I think one for me to finish on, and you've got a lot of international experience, and you've travelled and you've experienced things, which I think is awesome. And we've touched on a few different projects. What sort of, when you think of any sort of global projects or approaches, any of those that particularly inspire you, that you think actually Queensland can really learn from that project or that piece you've seen?
It's a really good question. And you did send this to me, and I thought, oh God, how do I answer this one? Look, from an Olympic perspective, you would have to say London is probably held up as one of the ones that is a really good standout example of how to deliver the games. Now, having said that, for the first year after they won the games, they stuffed around.
Yeah.
And it's only about 6 years out that they really started to get some momentum. They got a delivery partner on board and really helped drive the delivery of the very successfully of those games. And yes, it's seen as being able to deliver. What was really interesting was they had to re-benchmark.
Okay.
Not re-benchmark, re-baseline that program 6 years out because it was starting to really cost. When they re-baselined it, and then when it was finally done to that re-baseline, it was £500 million under. So what we need to do is grab the lessons out of that and apply them today, which I know that Simon Crooks, who's the CEO of Geeka, and that team are really looking at heavily. They're getting some international expertise in. They're getting the right locals in. So I think London, from a games delivery perspective, has got some really good answers. But there's no one thing around the world. There's elements around the world. I mentioned Bent Flyberg's book earlier. He talks about the Guggenheim in Spain museum, which was built, and the way the architect looked at it with the engineers and the contractor from different directions was able to deliver on time and on budget. Really complex building and iconic building on time and on budget. There's a whole range of projects and programs around the world. We look at the energy resources sector. They are very good at being able to deliver because there is fixed budgets.
Yeah.
So what I think we've got to be doing is also looking at cutting our cloth to suit and saying, if there is a budget of $2 billion for this program, what can we get done for $2 billion?
Yeah, what's
and
achievable?
So what are the key priorities? The Bruce Highway safety program is probably the best example of that coming forward. Is we've got $9 billion to upgrade the Bruce Highway. So what are our key priorities there? And the state is, the TMR is working very heavily on that. And what can we get done? So what are our ultimate priorities? And then what are our nice to haves? And if we've got money left over, we can start to do our nice to haves rather than saying it all must be one. Now, I remember having a briefing on a project south side of Brisbane a couple of years ago, and they showed us these plans, and they said, we've got $1.2 billion budget. And I went, well, the way I look at it, you got $3.5 billion here. So what's your priority? And there were 4 elements to the project. So what's your priority? All of it. No. What's the priority? And you're saying this is critical for the games. What is the priority element for the games? All of it. You're not going to get it done. If you've got $1.2 billion, what's your priority? And focus on that. If there's money then left over, then what else can you do? So we've got to come back to fit for purpose, and that is value for money. It's not just spending money willy-nilly. It's making sure that it's focused on achieving the outcome. That is what value for money is, in my view. And that's where I think there's a lot of lessons from around the world. Can I pick on any one project? I think the energy and resources sector has got some great lessons in that. So does there's a lot of public sector projects around the world. But I think from a games perspective, London, what they did for the last 6 years, there's some excellent lessons from that we can take on board.
Well, let's hope we do. Andrew, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for making the time. Thanks for everything you're doing for the industry and your role as CEO at QMCA. And I know your work at ARC Strategic Solutions keeps you busy as well. So you don't have many spare hours in the day, do you? But listen, I really appreciate making the time, and we'll definitely get you back on in 12 months or so and have another review of a land and see where we are.
No problem. Thank you for having me on, and all the best with your stuff too, Dave.
Thanks, mate. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed that episode of Future People. I've been your host, Daniel Moussa, and this has been brought to you by Thirdway Advisory. Please make sure you like, follow, share and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another intellectual and engaging conversation.